Hello, my name is Matt, and welcome to Cut Content. Been a while, so as you may or may not know, I've sort of done less YouTube work lately and focused more on streaming, but I've started to miss doing things like narrative content, and whenever I produce a stream that's about, how to do something, it inevitably gets lost to the ether, thus negating it for anyone who hasn't seen it. So, I thought today we would do an old-fashioned tips video on the best loadouts, or at least what I consider to be the most enjoyable loadouts, in Call of Duty Black Ops 4 for pickup games. This is not for ranked or search and destroy or anything like that. It is just for if you want to have some good, clean fun. I usually play Domination. And so, with that, let's get started. One thing to note is that, as far as classes go, I will always be using Scavenger, Lightweight, and Ghost, with one exception, which is the Spitfire class, as well as, now that I say it, the Mog 12 Shotgun class, and we will get to those in a bit. We're going to start out with the ICR-7. So the ICR-7 is, in my opinion, the best gun in Call of Duty. It has great damage, amazing range, and virtually no recoil if you stack it correctly. So, what you're going to want to do is put a reflex sight on it. It's traditionally the best sight in Call of Duty games, and that is true in Black Ops 4 as well. As well as you want to put on a grip, and a grip 2, and a long barrel. That's going to give you the longest possible range, and the least possible recoil. To the point where it becomes a bit of a laser. You see, there's a long distance here, and I'm still putting more than enough shots right into this guy's torso to take him out very reliably. Now, there aren't a lot of tricks to using this weapon. There's not a lot of recoil to compensate for, as you can see, once you've got this particular loadout equipped. So, mostly what you're going to want to be aware of is long sight lines are your friend, even more than a sniper rifle in a lot of cases, because those only have the one shot. This gun is going to be the best available option for any distance fighting. Tied pretty evenly with one other option. Now, let's switch up to a new class, and we are going to have to die each time, because there's not a lot to know about the ICR, other than if you want a really sturdy, reliable weapon that's going to get you kills at long and middle distance, that's the one to go for. So let's switch up to some of the more niche weapons. Right now, I'm using the Vapor XKG. XMG? XKG. I'm a fucking genius. So, the Vapor recently got a nerf, and I should say I'm producing this video as of November the 20th, 2018. So, it no longer is quite the monster that it once was, and you'll see some people who still prefer to use the Maddox. However, I find that even with the new nerf, that makes the recoil a little harder to control, and you'll see if I don't press anything, the recoil has a tendency to drift up, left, and then sort of in a circle, which is obviously not ideal. In order to combat some of that recoil, you're gonna have to be quick on the right joystick, but even more importantly, you want to make sure that recoil is the least of your worries. So I give this a long barrel and an ELO sight. ELO, as you can see, is the most wide open sight picture, which is always going to be what you want. It's why any weapons without an ELO sight use a reflex, because that gives you the largest amount of screen dedicated to seeing what else is going on. The long barrel gives it that extended range, and fast mags make sure that you're going to be pretty careful. You don't have extended mags. Extended mags tend to be better than fast mags, but in their absence, I like using fast mags myself. But the biggest boon here is rapid fire, because it means that you can put enough bullets into somebody that they're going to die before the recoil gets too out of control, which is going to be, in my opinion, even better than having anything to maintain recoil, since there isn't a grip or anything that can be equipped with this particular weapon. The one note I'll make is that some people prefer to swap out the long barrel or fast mags with a suppressor. That doesn't tend to be how I personally like to play the game, but it is very effective, and I've seen people use it with some pretty devastating effects. Now, let's just for fun, we're playing this battery. Cluster grenade.
Cluster grenade going out.
That hostage probably did not make it out of there. So let's start over. Unfortunately, there are no enemies while I'm displaying this, while I figured firing range would be a great place to show things off, because it's a firing range. It does have a downside of not many easy ways to kill yourself. So we have to keep respawning ourselves, but it's not a huge deal. This class is one that I mostly use for fun. I don't think it's one of the best ones, but it can be extremely satisfying. So, you don't have Ghost equipped on this class because you need room for an extra attachment for the primary weapon, which is the Spitfire SMG. Now, assault rifles are the kings in Black Ops 4, pretty undisputedly. However, there are certain situations in which an SMG can use this as well. Now, I don't usually use laser sights, but for this particular weapon, they're pretty excellent. So as you can see, I'm putting out a huge volume of fire here. Just absolutely insane. And basically, the goal is put out that volume of fire faster than anybody else at close range. And when you do it, make sure they're close enough that recoil isn't going to be a massive issue. Doubling down on the laser sight, getting the laser sight too, is, I don't think, worth it. Extended mags are your friend. I like fast mags a lot, but extended mags, the more bullets before you have to reload, the more likely you are to win a gunfight. Now, I can see sacrificing the elo sight for something else, like, for example, putting the Ghost perk back on. However, when I play this class, I try and run around so fast that Ghost isn't really an issue if I'm getting there and I'm shooting before anybody else notices. The other option that I always like to use is the Wildfire Operator mod. A lot of the Operator mods are kind of lackluster, which I actually appreciate because it means they're not automatically necessary, but that rate of fire is pretty much unbeatable with just about any weapon in the game. So, much like the Vapor, the recoil is going to be one of your biggest difficulties, but unlike the Vapor, you aren't going to want to be at anything resembling a middle distance. This is basically a shotgun type weapon, but it can put out a volume of fire even faster than any shotgun can. So, sometimes there is one major caveat, which is that this weapon will screw you. There are going to be moments when you shoot and try and kill somebody and you're going to go, how the hell did that possibly miss? A lot of the time, it's going to get, you know, a bunch of good shots maybe in the chest, but you'll see, as soon as that weapon kicks up, I just stitched an outline of this guy's head. And that is the biggest thing you're going to have to contend with. The recoil is so bad that usually, with the laser sight and wildfire mods, it won't be an issue. But if it kicks up, even for a sec, you might find yourself with just not enough bullets to put somebody down. So, long story short, I guess, basically, never use that for a hostage rescue. It will not go well. So, let's move on to the next class, another SMG class that I actually don't tend to use myself, because it doesn't totally fit my playstyle, but I've seen it used to great effect, and on the occasions that I have dipped into it, I found it to be extremely useful, in especially sort of close quarters matches. So we're using the GKS submachine gun, and we're giving it the same double grip that we saw with the ICR, but we're also adding a suppressor, and you'll notice that we definitely have Ghost on here. This is a stealth class. And I like it for stealth as opposed to something like the MX-9, which I actually have not liked as much since it received a nerf not that long ago. Because this still has a great rate of fire, and most importantly, no recoil. When you're using a weapon with not as much damage, like this GKS, I like to reduce recoil as much as possible to make up for it. Some things like the Spitfire sort of go against that entire philosophy because it's just about who cares how much damage you do if they've got a million bullets in their head, they're not going to be noticing. But I like to be a little more precise with my stealth classes, that and the Spitfire can't equip an SMG. So you'll notice if you get a good shot, every bullet right in that very tiny window, which is exactly what you're looking for. Where the Spitfire SMG is the last thing you want with a hostage rescue, this might be the first. So if you're doing a stealth class, I would highly, highly recommend using the GKS for it, because even more than perhaps the Vapor or Maddox, which are both assault rifle sort of SMG hybrids, I find that this weapon is capable of taking people out with the least amount of muss and fuss before they notice you're there. Once they notice you're there, that's when you're going to have a problem. Because this weapon, while pretty great and very accurate, if you miss those first few shots, suddenly somebody with more damage has to get a lot fewer hits on you. And I find that to be the most difficult aspect of using this class. I'm also going to take this opportunity to point out why I use Scavenger, Lightweight, and Ghost. I find that not worrying about ammunition, thanks to Scavenger, is incredibly relaxing and a fun way to play the game. And UAVs are so ubiquitous that Ghost is almost a necessity. However, lightweight is the biggest question because some people, pros especially, like to use the dexterity perk, which makes it faster for you to switch weapons and aim going over jumps and whatnot. Outside of ranked play, I haven't found a ton of use for that. So I tend to find that it's much more helpful to have that incredibly fast sprint in the pretty insanely quickly paced local or ranked multiplayer game, or not ranked, public multiplayer games. So let's move on to the Augur DMR. The Augur DMR is a really divisive weapon, and personally, I really get that, because sometimes it feels like the best gun in the game, and sometimes it feels like I couldn't knock over a can with a pea shooter with any less level of efficacy than I could use this gun. So basically what you're going to want to look at for this gun are what makes it work for you. This is a very subjective weapon. I always put the long barrel on because I like to use it not as a close range or mid-range DMR. I like to do the sort of lengthy firings. The one issue is if you're going for headshots, you'll notice that it is not the most consistent weapon in the world if you're releasing a bunch of shots at once, which in a lot of maps you kind of want to do because you don't have a ton in the way of opportunities to hit people before they're running out of sight. To that end, I've equipped high caliber 1 and 2. While 1 just makes headshots deal more damage, 2 also increases the amount of damage to the upper chest, which means that that recoil is going to be a little bit more forgiving for you. Because even if you're not hitting the head, you can still probably reliably in 3 or 4 shots put somebody down. Other people like to run things like the long barrel to make sure that, or not the long barrel, the fast mags to make sure that if you're using it up close, you're not going to find yourself in a bit of a pickle. I've seen some pros use that, and it does seem effective. It's just not personally how I would like to use the gun, and I think an assault rifle is going to serve you better for that range than this tactical rifle. So, moving on, those are the base 5 classes that I would recommend using in Call of Duty Black Ops 4. However, I want to do a special shout out to a 6th class, which is one of my personal favorites, and I debated whether or not I was going to be using a sniper or a shotgun. The sniper rifle is a lot of fun. The Paladin, especially when equipped with a reflex or iron sight or even a dual zoom, can actually be pretty nasty at mid-range, but ultimately, I just have so much fun with this shotgun that I felt the need to throw it out there. So, for the MOG 12, I'm using that rather than the SG-12 because I think the SG has such an insane amount of recoil that it just sort of negates the amount of fun that it is to use. In fact, I've actually minimized the amount of recoil for this MOG 12, and you'll notice that's sort of a recurring theme for me. I like to play a game with less recoil, with the exception of perhaps the Spitfire. So I have had to sacrifice Ghost, and you play this one actually similar to the Spitfire class because of that. I've also forsaken a sight, which is not something I generally care to do, but everything that we have currently equipped I think is so invaluable to this weapon's performance that it's really, really going to serve us better than even having that sight. So, what am I doing here? Basically, I want rapid fire for this weapon at all times. Not even because it's necessarily the best, but because there's nothing more annoying than shooting somebody point blank, having them survive with a sliver of health, and not being able to reset in time to get another shot off to kill them. I also always want fast magazines, because, you'll notice here, I've fired 2 shots, but I only take 1 reload. The speed reloader is helpful, but I don't think it's worth the points it takes up in your loadout. The other 2 things I'm using, in addition to those, are the long barrel and the barrel choke. Now, the long barrel is always helpful because otherwise the shotgun is kind of useless at anything greater than about point-blank range. And I want to get... It's never going to be quite a mid-range weapon, but a little more distance I think can be really helpful. Now, why am I using that barrel choke? The barrel choke does wonders for this weapon. The barrel choke essentially trades the pellet spread for a... almost a slug shot, if not exactly. So, even from a room's length of distance, you see how close those are together. That can make this weapon a much more reliable one-shot gun. Even something like a headshot, you'll notice, with a shotgun, that's not something you can do a lot, but those are all right up its nostrils. Then with the rapid fire, in case one is enough to take him out, 3 quick shots on target is going to down just about anybody, regardless of the amount of armor, and then fast reload is going to pretty much save your bacon. Now, as far as, so a lot of the weapon issues we've seen today, the things that you're going to have to watch out for are recoil or optimal distance. You'll notice with the ICR, it was close ranges are necessarily your friend. With Vapor, that recoil can really screw you over if you fire too long. Spitfire, anything too close, anything more than immediately close, anything too far, and you're basically useless. GKS, slow fire rate, Auger, recoil. The Mag 12 is all about distance, because and it's not just about the distance aspect of it, which I'll explain in a second. So, obviously, I've geared this gun out to have the best possible range. However, it's still going to have a damage fall-off rate that's not going to make it as helpful with long-range engagements. Even really medium engagements, you have to be on the low end for it to work. But the distance aspect of the distance problem is about 50%. The other thing is, this is a loadout with which you never want to stop moving. Because if you do, if anybody gets a shot on you from a distance with any reliable accuracy, if you're out in the open, if you're not running around as fast as you can, that's where you're going to run into some problems. So if you move as fast as possible, somebody's shooting at you, getting behind here, and even you can turn around and immediately camp the entrance, people always come back. It's pretty fantastic. That works, or if you're going for somebody, getting close enough to hit them won't be nearly as difficult with these loadouts as long as you're continuing to maintain that medium-short distance. So those are what I would consider to be the most effective, or at least most enjoyable classes in Black Ops 4. While none of them are perfect, a lot of them tend towards the sort of well-rounded aspect. The only other two I would recommend are, one, the
cluster grenade going
sniper
out.
class that I briefly referred to, and also the Titan LMG is a great all-arounder weapon, but just none of it's that counterintuitive, and I think it's a very easy weapon to make work, so I didn't know that it was worth devoting a portion of our limited time to. So that's just a very quick overview. I'm looking forward to doing some more tips and narrative content videos in the future. But for somebody like me who's always on the lookout for what they find to be the most effective and most fun weapons in a game like this, I pretty much always am on the lookout for up-to-date information, and there hasn't been a lot of that since a couple of the last updates. So, while I may not be a pro, I know my way around a public game, and with this, maybe you can too. So, that's a real quick overview. Thank you all so much for watching. You can follow Cut Content or 12 Highlanders now on YouTube, or at 12 Hangry Highlanders on Twitch. Or I guess just 12 Angry Highlanders. Twitch doesn't use the @ symbol. If you want to check out some more content here, but mostly I just hope you enjoyed it, and everybody have a delightful day.